Welcome to this self-guided tour of the Utah Inland Port. The Utah Legislature in 2018 created the Utah Inland Port, taking control of the land use of more than 1/5 of the land within Salt Lake City, as well as land in West Valley City and Magnet. In this bill, lawmakers gave almost all of the property tax revenue from this newly established port jurisdictional area to finance development by the unelected Utah Inland Port Authority, UIPA. The UIPA jurisdictional area is a whopping 16,000 acres. This land is entirely privately owned, mostly by real estate developers. We know of no other inland port in the U.S. that is built entirely on private property. This may make it more difficult for UIPA to enforce any of its promises that development within the port will utilize clean energy or be environmentally sustainable. The area north of I-80 that is targeted for most of the proposed new construction encroaches on a rich wildlife habitat of open uplands and wetlands bordering the Great Salt Lake. Within this roughly 6,000 undeveloped acreage, 152 million square feet of new warehouses are proposed to be built. Based on data from other inland ports, these warehouses will generate an estimated 67,000 diesel truck trips per day and 147,000 car trips per day. This increase in traffic will inevitably degrade our air quality. Let's start on I-80, passing the airport on our right. The new $4 billion Salt Lake International Airport is technically outside the port's jurisdiction, but it is a key part of the logistics infrastructure for the inland port. We have no data on the total amount of pollution that would be generated by the airport. A study of pollution from the Los Angeles airport found that the airport was responsible for over half as much pollution as all the vehicles on their freeways. Existing Amazon warehouses and the Amazon Fulfillment Center are along the 700 north border of the port area. 5 new warehouses have been built inside the jurisdiction and more are coming soon. Few details of UIPA are made public. The public has heard only vague promises that it will be the world's first green port. These Amazon warehouses, and the other new construction on our route, lack elements of environmental sustainability, like porous roads and parking lots, dark sky lighting, bird-safe buildings, and drought-resistant conservation landscaping. Turning south off of I-80 on 5600 West, you'll see the Stadler Rail Company. One of the first new, and few manufacturers in the port, Stadler manufactures both electric and diesel trains. Stadler intends to expand its operations onto 63 acres, just to the south of its headquarters. Stadler has no plans to use sustainable building practices as they expand. The Vobev Bottling Company opened its 1.2 million square feet of warehouses in 2021. Their application to Salt Lake City Public Utilities failed to project their water use. Vobev is using almost 2 million gallons of water per day. The City Council recently passed an ordinance limiting water consumption by new businesses to 200,000 gallons per day. 1/10 that of Vobev. The Union Pacific Intermodal Facility was built by Union Pacific on 260 acres. 53-foot shipping containers are lifted from trains to trucks, or from trucks to trains, using outdated dirty diesel equipment. Union Pacific has plans to expand its operation in this area. Immediately south of the Union Pacific Rail Yard is the site of a proposed transloading facility. UIPA claims this is the key to the success of the inland port. Port managers contend that this state-of-the-art facility is necessary to encourage West Coast cargo to come to Salt Lake on trains, rather than on trucks, which will improve efficiency. But when this additional cargo arrives in Salt Lake, it will be distributed on diesel trucks, shifting diesel emissions from California to Utah. Rail-oriented developments usually require a conditional use permit because such developments heavily impact the environment. UIPA doesn't want to spend the time or money that such a study would entail. It argues that a permit is not technically required, since the transloading facility won't require new tracks to be laid. This seems hypocritical, since the whole purpose of the transloading facility is to increase the amount of freight moved by rail. It reveals how UIPA is distorting and dismissing regulatory concerns to expedite the project, sidestepping serious pollution and public health questions. Let's pause here on 5600 West. Look to the south. And look to the west. The inland port jurisdiction continues farther than the eye can see in both directions. It extends beyond 2100 south, and west to 8000 west. Most of the area has been built up with warehouses, manufacturing and commercial businesses, and residences. The property tax differential from these properties is the core mechanism for the UIPA, long-term financing. Returning to I-80, heading west. This 743-acre section is undistinguishable in the wetlands, but it is the first segment you see along I-80. This is the former Salt Lake City landfill. It is now owned by the Utah School and Institutional Trust Lands Administration, or SITLA. Of course, it contains highly toxic wastes. SITLA intends to clean it up and sell it off in parcels for development. Traveling west, you'll see the area's open lands. From 5600 west to the Great Salt Lake, these vast open lands have been undeveloped for decades, despite developers' dreams. That's because wetlands are extremely hard to build on and are protected under the Clean Water Act. A permit from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is required for any development. In 1991, the Great Salt Lake was designated a Western Hemispheric Shorebird Reserve Site, where more than 10 million migratory birds rely on the lake for resting, nesting and refueling during their migratory journey. They also act as important buffers for flooding, and function as natural water quality filters. Most of the new warehouses and other projects are projected to be built here, which will destroy these wetlands and natural habitats. Now, we want to point out a few landmarks that we are not visiting, but that you can see on the map. The Goggin Drain is part of the Salt Lake County Flood Control System. It is located parallel to the port's northern border. Its function is to move water to the Great Salt Lake during spring runoff and large storm events. The Goggin Drain flows directly to the Great Salt Lake, which contains many wetland and upland habitats critical to bird nesting, resting and refueling. The Great Salt Lake is less than 1/2 mile from the port jurisdictional boundary. Because water levels of the lake have been declining due to climate change, megadrought conditions, and upstream diversions since statehood, the exposed lake bed is contributing fine dust particles to the air which blows toward the residential areas along the Wasatch Front. This dust can include arsenic, heavy metals, fertilizers, pesticides and other pollutants that can harm human health. 25 elementary and middle schools are just outside the port jurisdictional area, to the east and south. They will be the first victims of new port development. These schools currently serve predominantly low-income and minority neighborhoods. Because of existing truck traffic, oil refineries, mining, and the airport, these schools have already seen a documented and dramatic increase in asthma, autism, birth defects, learning disabilities, and poor performance. This makes the West Side a leading example of environmental injustice. We hope this tour has given you a better understanding of why expansion of the inland port and its negative impacts on our health, on the Great Salt Lake, and on taxpayers, is not a development that our strong economy, or the growing population of Utah, needs.